The studio lights were merciless, but they had nothing on the ice in Tamar Braxton's voice when she leaned across that live stage and dropped the bomb that froze the entire room. "I'm his lifeline now, Yandy, you're retired." The words sliced through the air like a final verdict. Yandy Smith didn't flinch at first. She just stared, lips parted, eyes wide with the kind of shock that only comes when your worst nightmare gets spoken out loud in front of millions. Tamar didn't stop there. She kept going, her tone dripping with contempt as she told Yandy she was done playing second string, done watching from the sidelines while someone else raised what she now called her family. The audience gasped. Some covered their mouth. Others pulled out their phones before the producers could even cut to break. This wasn't a reunion special gone wrong. This was a public execution dressed up as television. Tamar accused Yandy of clinging to a ghost of a relationship that had already moved on, of using children as weapons, of refusing to accept that the man she once called her everything had chosen a different lifeline, one who actually showed up. Every sentence landed harder than the last. Yandy's hands started to shake. A single tear escaped before she could stop it, and the camera caught it in brutal high definition. Backstage, chaos erupted. Family members who had come to support one side or the other were suddenly screaming at each other in the green room. Mendici's name was being thrown around like a live grenade. Some claimed he knew this was coming. Others swore he was blindsided and furious. Social media detonated within seconds, clips of Tamar's takedown already racking up millions of views while the show was still on air. "Yandy is finished." One comment read, "Tamar just ended her whole legacy in one sentence." But the real question burning through every group chat and comment section is this: what did Tamar know that gave her the confidence to go nuclear on live television? Was this about love, money, custody, or something darker that's been hiding in the shadows for months? Because the way Tamar smiled after delivering that final blow, like she had more receipts and wasn't afraid to read every single one, suggested this humiliation was only the beginning. Yandy sat there publicly stripped of the title she'd worn for years while Tamar declared herself the new chapter. And somewhere in the middle of all that wreckage sat the children whose lives are about to be ripped apart even further. The live show was supposed to bring answers. Instead, it set off a war that's about to get louder, messier, and far more personal than anyone watching could have prepared for. As the words "I am his lifeline, now Yandy are retired," echoed through the studio and across every device streaming the explosive live show, the atmosphere shifted from tense to outright chaotic, with the audience unsure whether to clap or gasp in horror while Yandy sat frozen in her seat. Her eyes locked on Tamar, who stood tall and unyielding like she had been, waiting for this exact moment to unleash years of built-up frustration and resentment. The host attempted to steer the conversation back to safer ground, mentioning something about co-parenting and moving forward. But Tamar cut him off with a sharp gesture and a look that said she was not done yet, not by a long shot. She leaned forward, her voice dripping with conviction as she accused Yandy of retiring from the real responsibilities of family life long before any public split, claiming that while Yandy was busy turning their private struggles into content and legal maneuvers, Tamar had stepped in as the steady presence Mendici's needed to navigate the storms of fame, legal issues, and emotional turmoil. Yen finally broke her silence, her voice trembling but gaining strength with every word as she fired back that Tamar had no place inserting herself into a family she barely knew, and that this public attack was nothing more than a desperate grab for attention in a world that had already moved past her own spotlight days. Tamar smirked at the accusation and doubled down, revealing what she described as private conversations and text messages where Mendici's had expressed gratitude for her support during times when Yandy was absent, focused on her own battles, and battles that often spilled over into the children's lives, creating instability rather than the security Yandy claimed to fight for. The live audience was divided. Some members nodding in agreement with Tamar while others shook their heads in disbelief at the level of detail being shared on air. And the online world exploded even faster, with fans posting reactions in real time, calling the moment the most savage humiliation in hip-hop, reality history, and wondering aloud how Mendices would respond once he saw the clip, which was already going viral before the show had a chance to cut to a break. Emotions ran high as Yandy rose from her chair, her body language shifting from defensive to combative as she pointed a finger toward Tamar and accused her of exploiting a vulnerable situation for her own narrative gain, saying that Tamar knew nothing about the sacrifices made behind closed doors or the lengths Yandy had gone to protect the family unit from outside forces and internal pressures alike. Tamar did not back away. Instead, she stood her ground and hit back with even more personal claims, suggesting that Yandy's version of protection looked a lot like control and that the children had suffered more from the constant public drama than from any so-called absence. The host looked visibly uncomfortable, trying to signal for producers to intervene. But the energy in the room had taken on a life of its own, with security personnel moving closer to the stage in case the verbal sparring turned physical. Though both women seemed more focused on landing their verbal blows on physical confrontation. What made the moment even more shocking was the way Tamar framed her role not as a replacement but as a necessary evolution, claiming that Mendices had found in her the peace and stability that had been missing for too long, and that Yandy needed to accept that her chapter had closed and a new one had begun with someone willing to do the hard work without the cameras rolling. Yandy counter Ed by bringing up old wounds from their shared circle, suggesting that Tamar had shown interest in the situation long before she had any right to, and that this so-called lifeline act was just the latest in a pattern of opportunistic behavior that the public was finally seeing in full color. The family members present in the audience were clearly torn, with some appearing to side with Tamar based on their body language, while others looked ready to jump in and defend Yandy, creating a ripple effect of tension that spread beyond the stage and into the comments sections, where fans debated who was right and who was wrong. But the truth was that both women had exposed enough raw emotion and buried grievances to leave everyone questioning the full story behind the headlines that had led to this explosive confrontation. And as Tamar continued to press her advantage by mentioning specific instances where she claimed to have been there for the children during school events and health scares when Yandy was tied up in court or media obligations, Yandy's expression shifted from anger to something more pained, as if the words were landing on old bruises she had tried to hide from the world. The live show that was meant to offer a glimpse into healing or at least honest conversation had instead become a battlefield where reputations were being dismantled in real time, and the stakes felt higher than ever because the children at the center of it all would eventually see these clips and have to process the public war between the women in their lives. The social media storm was relentless, with hashtags about the takedown trending worldwide, and viewers at home split between those who felt Tamar had gone too far and those who believed Yandy had been exposed for the first time in a way that finally made sense of the ongoing custody whispers and relationship rumors swirling around Mendices' new chapter. The argument showed no signs of death, escalating as Tamar delivered another blow by suggesting that Yandy was more interested in maintaining her image as the strong, independent woman than in actually allowing space for a new support system that could benefit everyone involved, especially the kids who needed consistency over conflict. Yandy shot back that consistency was exactly what she had fought for through every legal document and every public statement, and that Tamar's sudden appearance as the hero was a rewrite of history that ignored the years of dedication and the personal cost Yandy had paid to keep the family intact as much as possible. The studio lights seemed to grow hotter under the pressure of the moment, capturing every micro-expression and beat of sweat as the two women circled each other verbally, with the audience hanging on every word and the producers scrambling behind the scenes to decide whether to let it play out or force a hard cut, two that would only make the leaked footage even more damaging in the long run. It was clear that this was not the end of the revelations, because Tamar had the look of someone who had more to unload, and Yandy was not about to let her walk away from this live stage without answering for the pain she had just caused in front of the world. And as the tension built to another boiling point, with Tamar preparing to speak again, the entire room held its breath, waiting to see what fresh hell would come next. In this already unforgettable and brutal confrontation that had everyone asking the same question: how much more could be exposed before the show finally ended, and what would be left of Yandy's public image once the dust settled from this explosive live takedown? The back and forth continued for what felt like hours, though only minutes had passed on the clock, with each woman digging deeper into the other's weaknesses and exposing layers of the story that had never been aired publicly before. Tamar brought up a specific time when she said she had to step in because Yandy had chosen to attend a high-profile event instead of being by Mendice's side during a critical moment, and Yandy fired back that Tamar was twisting facts to fit her narrative and that the event in question was actually a work obligation she could not avoid without risking everything she had built to provide for the family. The audience gasped again as the details became more specific and personal, making it impossible for anyone to stay neutral in the face of such raw accusations flying across the stage. And just when it seemed like the argument might finally reach a breaking point, Tamar took a step closer and said, "There is still one more thing everyone needs to hear about what really happened behind the scenes." And Yandy braced herself, knowing that whatever came next would change the course of this already devastating confrontation forever tomorrow. Then took a deep breath and dropped the next bomb, saying that the one more thing everyone needed to hear was that Mendices had already started making quiet moves behind the scenes to limit Yandy's access and influence because he was tired of the constant battles and the way she turned every private disagreement into a public spectacle that hurt the children more than anyone else. Yandy's face went pale as the words sank in, and she demanded to know what Tamar was talking about, accusing her of making up stories to justify her own position. But Tamar did not flinch. Instead, she pulled out her phone right there on the live stage and began reading messages that she claimed came directly from Mendices, thanking her for being the calm in the storm and asking her to help protect the kids from the back and forth that Yandy seemed determined to keep alive. The audience erupted into a mix of gasps and murmurs. Some people in the front row covered their mouths in shock, while others nodded like this confirmed everything they had suspected about the real power dynamics in the family. The host tried again to regain control, asking if this was really appropriate to share on air. But Tamar ignored him completely and kept going, her voice steady and cold as she described how Mendices had confided in her that he felt Yandy was more focused on winning the public narrative than on actually co-parenting in peace. Yandy shot to her feet, her voice cracking as she called Tamar a liar and a manipulator who had clearly gotten inside Mendices' head during a vulnerable time and was now using his words against the woman who had stood by him for years. Through every arrest, every court date, and every headline that tried to destroy him, Tamar laughed a short, bitter sound and told Yandy that standing by someone only counts if you are actually present when it matters and not just when the cameras are rolling or when there is money and attention to be gained from the drama. Emotions ran high as security moved even closer to the stage, ready to step in if the two women got any closer. The family members in the audience were visibly divided, with one of Yandy's relatives standing up and shouting that Tamar had no right to speak on their family, while another person who appeared to be connected to Tamar clapped slowly and nodded in agreement, creating a tense standoff that made the entire studio feel like it could explode at any second. Online, the reaction was nuclear, with fans posting side-by-side clips of Yandy's stunned face and Tamar's confident delivery, while others demanded that Mendices come out and confirm or deny the messages himself, because if they were real, then everything about the custody rumors suddenly made a lot more sense, and Yandy's image as the unbreakable matriarch was cracking in real time right 3 inches front of millions. Tamar pressed on, saying that the retirement she spoke about earlier was not just emotional but practical, because Mendices had already decided that the old way of doing things was over and that he needed someone who could provide stability without turning every disagreement into a war that played out on social media and in courtrooms. Yandy fired back with her own accusations, claiming that Tamar had been feeding Mendices lies about her and twisting every situation to make herself look like the hero, while painting Yandy as the villain who only cared about control and money. The arguments circled back to the children, with Tamar insisting that the kids had told her they felt more at peace when she was around, and that Yandy's constant legal fights and public statements were confusing them and making them anxious. Yandy looked like she had been slapped across the face at that revelation, and she accused Tamar of using the children as pawns in the same way she had just accused Yandy of doing. The host was now visibly sweating and looking off camera for guidance on whether to cut the segment, but the producers seemed frozen, just like everyone else, because this was the kind of raw television that no one wanted to stop, even as it crossed every line of privacy and decency. The social media storm grew louder, with some viewers defending Yandy and saying that Tamar was out of line for bringing private family matters to the public in such a brutal way. while others celebrated Tamar for finally exposing what they called Yandy's toxic patterns that had been hidden behind her strong woman persona for too long. Tamar delivered another blow by saying that she was not just the lifeline now, but the one who would make sure the family moved forward without the constant chaos that Yandy seemed to thrive on. And that if Yandy truly cared about the kids, she would step back gracefully instead of fighting a battle she had already lost the moment. Mendices chose peace over drama. Yandy's eyes filled with tears again, but this time she did not try to hide them as she told Tamar that no one could ever replace what she had built with Mendez, and that this public humiliation would not change the fact that she was still their mother and would fight for them until her last breath. Tamar shook her head and said that was exactly the problem, because the fighting had to end and the children deserved a home where love did not come with conditions or public battles. The tension in the room was unbearable as the two women stared each other down, with the audience holding its collective breath and the online comments scrolling so fast that no one could keep up with the flood of opinions and theories about what would happen next to the family that had already been through so much. The live show had long since abandoned any pretense of being about healing or insight and had become a full-scale public execution of Yandy's place in the story, with Tamar standing over the wreckage like she had been waiting years to deliver this exact moment, and Yandy looking like the ground had been pulled out from under her in front of the entire world. And just when it seemed like tomorrow might finally be finished, she leaned in one more time and said there was still something else that would make everything even clearer. About why Yandy was retired now and why the family had already chosen a different path forward without her. Yandy braced herself again, her hands shaking at her sides as she waited for whatever fresh revelation tomorrow was about to unload. Because at this point, nothing felt off limits. And the entire entertainment world was watching to see just how much more damage could be done before someone finally pulled the plug on this explosive and heartbreaking confrontation. Then revealed the something else that would push Yandy over the edge completely by saying that Mendices had already begun changing the legal and practical details of the children's lives, including who could pick them up from school and who was listed as the emergency contact because he wanted stability, and Tamar was the one providing it without turning every decision into another court battle or social media post. Yandy looked like the air had knocked out of her, and she accused Tamar of